asking you about your background. So, how are you?
I'm good, thanks, Shangane.
I'm also good. So,
Good, thanks.
can you please share about your background, because I just know you
Blessing Karumbidza.
pardon?
My name is Blessing Karumbidza.
Blessing Karumbidza.
Yes.
Nice to meet you, sir.
Thanks.
So, I've noticed or researched that you have been doing, or you hold multiple degrees across various fields. What motivated you, sir, to pursue such diverse academic qualifications?
I guess it has to do with my sense of, so just in terms of background, I grew up in Zimbabwe, born to a Mozambican father, Malawian mother, home Zimbabwe, and bringing all these multicultural backgrounds and growing up in Zimbabwe, born, I can tell you my years, I'm not a woman, so we're not afraid to, I'm 50 now, I was born 74. And as a young person, I saw the tail end of the war of liberation in Zimbabwe. I saw my mother being brutalized by the Rhodesia Front. I saw my father being harassed by the Rhodesia Front. I saw as a young boy, 5, 6 years, as I told you, from the year 1 to 4, I was in Mozambique.
Yes.
So I came to Zimbabwe at the age of 5. And this was around 78, at the very tail end of the War of Liberation, when negotiations for settling the independence that came into Zimbabwe in 1980 had taken shape. Then going to Zimbabwe in 1980, there was something that was emphasized for everyone going to school under the government of Robert Mugabe.
Can you elaborate the year?
1980.
1980.
That's when I started grade 1.
Oh.
So it was told to us that we are a product of a struggle for independence. But the struggle for independence come in phases, of which, the first phase was the armed struggle, which you did not have in South Africa. There was no armed struggle in South Africa. The South African struggle was about sporadic fights to make apartheid in the South Africa ungovernable. In Zimbabwe, we had a guerrilla war, where people went into the bush, trained, came back from Mozambique, Tanzania, Zambia, to fight in the country. Guerrilla war, where the liberation movements, two forces, Zanla under ZANU-PF and ZIPRA under ZAPU, fought side by side or in different areas to dislodge the government of Ian Smith. So I'm giving this background because when I went to do grade 1, one of the things that we were told was that we were going into a syllabus that was called Education with Production. So our education was not meant to make us look for work, but to produce, to be part of the productive forces within the economy, to join the economy as producers.
Not consumers.
Not consumers, not buyers, not workers. We were told that liberation and independence was about to liberate the land and liberate the mineral resources. And us, the people, now had to go into the second stage of the liberation struggle that was about fighting not with guns and spears and machetes, but we now had to fight with the pen and book. We had to fight with knowledge. We needed to go into universities, into high schools, into colleges to acquire the knowledge that would help us to enter this second phase
Become
of
this.
liberation. So each student, each scholar, each Zimbabwean going into this system of education who had been indoctrinated with the desire to be part of these soldiers of liberation in this second stage. So our 1980 was not your 1994. Your 1994 was about democracy and independence. We got it. Mandela is out. We must go now partying. But we were told that we had to be part of the agency of what is called liberation. It's a process, it's not an event. So when I went to university, there are a number of things that shaped the choice of courses that I chose. Before you start doing any course through orientation, it would take you through the whole university system, pedagogy, what is education about, what is archaeology, what is history, how does it help in this struggle for independence, what is medicine, what is what. Then you then have subject advisors who would then say, okay, you do not have this kind of maths at high school. I did history, I did Bible knowledge, religious studies, divinity, I did languages, Shona and English, and so from that, and geography. So from that, I had a very good, having grown in the rural areas as well, where we went to school through money from growing our own crops. So I grew up in a rural local space where my mother was a peasant farmer, my father worked in the town, and the combination of what my father brought from work and what my mother made from sewing with her own sewing machine, hand crocheting, and the garden during the day is what made the family economy. So this family economy, even us as children, participated in it by going to the deep, taking cattle to the deep tank, looking after cattle, knowing how to plow. So the home and the family economy was itself a university. So if you take someone who does or who studied agriculture in at a diploma level, and the agriculture that I learned in my own home, that person may have bookish knowledge and cannot farm at the level I can from learning within that college, that university of the home economy. So your question is, I've studied across a multi and interdisciplinary space where I've done economic history, development economics, sociology, political economy. It has always been motivated by wanting to understand the material conditions in which the black child like myself was growing up and how it became that way. As a reader of history, I was able to realize that countries are at a level of development that's not similar. Yet, if you look at Africa, it has more resources than Europe and America put together, but Africa is considered underdeveloped, poor, and is behind. So the question and the area of inquiry has been, how did this become so? And in studying just at the elementary level of history, it would tell you that by the 12th century, China and Africa were the most developed economies in the world. But after the Middle Ages and the passing of the Dark Ages in Europe, Europe went through a fundamental revolution that in the 18th century tied to imperial expansion of Europe outside the European space. into Africa, Asia, and Latin America. They started bringing human labor into Europe and into all the spaces they started to control. And that led a level of a trajectory of development that by the end of the 19th century and the 20th century, Africa had become not less developed but underdeveloped. And this process of underdevelopment was a systematic, properly orchestrated system where Europeans came to Africa, they brought Jesus, the Bible, the cross, and they took away everything from us, our culture, our identity, our minerals, and our people. And we remained kneeling down, waiting for our Father who art in heaven to bring us everything that we want. Which is why it's not surprising today that an African people can start a church, go and buy a whole factory, shut it down, open a big auditorium church, and then spend 3 weeks fasting so that they can get jobs. So just in the sense of how I chose the area of study, I'm always in my area of study has to do mostly with trying to understand why are we the way we are? Why are we the people who, why is it that you and me are not speaking in Nguni language? We have to resort to speak in English. Our listeners are most likely not white people. Your listeners for this podcast are probably Nguni like you and me. Kodwa asikhulumi ngesizulu, so khuluma ngesingisi, even uze basizwe. Even when we wake up in the morning, we go have breakfast, you want a French toast, English breakfast, and all these things. Into the slungu zisingene kakhulu to a point where we are the only nation that is very proud, easily let go of its own culture and tradition so that we can be recognized. Our desire for recognition by white people. That's why as soon as if you become rich, you will not marry a black girl, you look for a white man.
I look for a Western girl.
Yeah. If a black woman becomes, has made it in life, the highest level of achievement is looking for an old white man to get married, then she has made it. Why? Because development has been made akin and like becoming white is the desire of the average uneducated black child or miseducated black child. And unfortunately, we have a lot of black people with certificates but no knowledge. Knowledge begins with knowing who you are, why you are who you are, and why you are where you are. And then what do you do with those circumstances? Because you are not a child of an accident. You were created particularly at this time, for such a time like this, because God placed in you what He is adequate for you to take your family, your village, your community, your country to where it should be in a status that glorifies God.
So I have a question.
There's nothing about Imjondolo and black poverty that glorifies God. There's nothing about the travails and the wailing and the crying and the sweat and blood of the black child that makes God happy. And yet our understanding, even the way white people came and taught us religion, taught us about God as if we did not know God. This is why I respect, as I'm a Christian, but I still respect the Shembe people. I still respect the prophet Isaiah Shembe, because what he did was to come to us and say, Tina siyamazi uNkulunkulu, we had a direct relationship with God. Before laba bakanyindlebe befika, we actually would say to God, Stella Mans, kunete same time. But now, We were told for you to be a good Christian, you must have a jacket and tie, you must shave, you must wear like a white man. I've stayed in UK, and I understand staying in America and in UK and in Norway, that place is very cold. The tie is there to tie and just hold your warmth generated by the body there. We don't need those things here in Africa. And yet it has become, when you go to the interview, it has become what you need to do in order to keep going, in order to be accepted, for people to listen to you.
So my first questions will be, like, South Africans are facing huge unemployment rates, but the outsiders, not outsiders, the foreigners or other Africans.
Yeah.
I don't know how I can put
It's
it, but
difficult.
yes, they seem doing okay. How do you see that situation?
Yeah, it is tricky. The unemployment rates in South Africa are increasingly going up, which is a factor of an economy which is not catching up with the population growth. As the number of universities increase and programs to open up black access into the universities improve and increase, the number of graduates are growing exponentially, but the number of jobs are not growing. The economy is going into a job-saving spin style where a number of companies are getting automated, using IT and technology more than human beings as part of a cost-saving mechanism. And within that context, you have foreign nationals that come into South Africa and they seem to be succeeding. And your question is, how is that so?
Yes.
It's a number of factors. If you look at, if you just look at many universities, faculty by faculty, you see a lot of foreign nationals who are professors and HO head of departments, in some cases deputy vice chancellors, to vice chancellors, to deans, because there is a longer history of liberation outside South Africa, where these countries have been already openly accessing higher education. So when South Africa opened up, a lot of those came to South Africa because South Africa required these skills. But they also, the average non-South African young people who are coming to South Africa because South Africa is sold or has sold itself as a country of opportunity. So South Africa is the United States of Africa.
South Africa is the United States of
South Africa is the Dubai of Africa. South Africa is the Switzerland of Africa. How is that so? South Africa is a settler colonial state. This is the only country on Africa you will find more than 1 million people who are white.
Are there more opportunities than other?
Because it's a settler society, there is a larger group of white people in South Africa. They have created more business and industrial opportunity. So South Africa has a very diversified economy, mining, agriculture, education, in steel, in services, in logistics, with a diversified and developed air system. You have big airports in the big metros. You have big, across on the eastern seaboard, Durban Port, Port Elizabeth Port, Western Cape Port, Richards Bay. These are very big cross-intercontinental harbors that are able to dock big, large ships. So South Africa is indeed the entry point of Europe into Africa. Even 1652, Jan van Riebeeck arrives at the Cape, and then through and from South Africa, the journey north into the rest of Africa came from South Africa. So it is easy to understand and appreciate that with that kind of sophisticated economy in regional terms, there will be more people coming to South Africa. But then your question is, how is the young South African not making it where the foreign national who comes into the country, he or she can't even say Dumelang, Sawubona, Likai, and Ninjani. But within a reasonably short period of time, this person has shelter over his head, is probably able to drive, he has 3 meals a day, and this young South African is battling. For me, it's a factor of attitude and training.
Attitude and training.
Let's start with training. So if your schooling system is training people for memory, to remember, Jan van Riebeeck arrived 1652, so what? Unandi was the mother of Ushaka, yes, so what? So are we able to use education, are we using education to teach people how to think, to teach people how to apply in life? So the sense that you get educated, you leave school, you become a lawyer, you become a doctor, you become an accountant, you become an engineer or an architect. Those are your elite programs. Then there are the journalists, the teachers, the nurses, and what. Then there's another group of South Africans, the celebrities, those that are on TV, those that get paid for the number of appearances on the big screen. Then there is the blue-collar worker, those that dig the trenches and what have you. And mostly those jobs, the hands jobs, are looked down upon. And the average non-South African that is making it here is coming with an attitude that says, I will do whatever it is for me to survive. So they've already come from a background like me, who did agriculture in primary, secondary, and high school. And some have even done it at college. And they are not scared and afraid and ashamed to make their hands dirty. Where the average South African feels going to a farm, hiring a bakkie, getting a full bucket of cabbages and standing on the street corner at I see kabishi, because you are a TikTok generation. You need glitz and glamour. And because of your maths literacy, your maths is so poor that you cannot realize that if you buy cabbages at 7 rands each and then sell it at 15 rands each, you have made 8 rands a day, and someone has taken 4 months to make 7 rands, and you're making 8 rands just in one day. So if you sell 1,000 heads of cabbage in a day, you have made 8,000 rands. So the maths literacy is so bad that even simple money mathematics is something. Someone would rather finish school with an agriculture degree and go and work on a farm and be paid 7.5 a month, whilst someone is prepared to go and buy 1,000 head of cabbage and sell them in 5 days, so that in every week they sell 1,000 head of cabbage, they have made 40,000, and in that week he has made 8,000 rands. And the maths does not seem to be so open and so apparent.
Is it the lack of education or the system we're in?
It's this, what the education tells you to do is to have fine English to beg to apply and to position yourself in this sophisticated slave trade, where you're putting yourself available and up, and the competition is to be the better slave, to be the most disciplined slave, the most sophisticated slave, rather than be a producer. And we seem to think our education system has been so disadvantaging to the black child, in the sense that there is an assumption that everyone needs a degree. I do not know who told the South African government to do away with FET colleges and technical colleges like Mangosuthu Technology, Durban Technology, ML Sultan, all those colleges, and then wake up and tell them that they are now universities of technology. And rather than producing people who are qualified in hands and motor skills, which is what the guy coming from Mozambique, what do you know Mozambicans for? They fix cars and they weld. They do practical work. What do you know Malawians for? They work in hotels and they cook very beautiful meals. What do you know Zimbabweans for? They build. Bashiselinze. What do you know Tanzanians for? They fix cars, they farm. Nigerians? The only Nigerians you know are the ones you are told about on television that work with the SAPS friends to sell drugs. You do not know about the Nigerians who are in IT, in film production. The most advanced film industry on the whole of African continent is Nollywood, the Nigerian film industry. It caters for all sorts of different things. It's educative. It showcases their culture. So the question is really important. And this is why I said, for me, it's a two-pronged issue around attitude and training. So if you give the average South African a bag of lemons, they would create a beautiful poem, a poetry of complaint about how bitter the lemons are and how he preferred oranges. They would create a very beautiful anthology of blaming another person. Whites and Indians have the oranges and us blacks have the lemons. But if you give that, the chances are, if you give a foreign national a basket of lemons, they will eat one and say, ish, this thing is bitter. Then their education will kick in and say, but if I put honey and sugar and boil this and prickle this, I can make some prickle, I can also make lemonade. Because the education system, on one hand, has allowed them to think. And the attitude is one that says, I don't have a granny who has a pension here. I do not have 350 here for being born black and poor. It is up to me and my hands, and up to me and myself, to make sure that these lemons give me some sustainability and livelihood. Then, instead of using their phone to dance and their data amapiano ne Jerusalem, they would start Googling a recipe for making lemonade and marmalade jam and all those things. And they'll fake it until they make it. So for me, it's a combination of attitude and education. So until such a time our people are exposed to a way of thinking that says, me, Langelihle, Bani, Shangane, I am responsible, not Ramaphosa, not Jacob Zuma. Those people are just drivers of a system that's very big and sophisticated. And in most cases in this country, they are not even running the country. The country is run by the Oppenheimers and all the other people who have the money, and there are puppets that are being controlled, and you actually want a puppet to control things your way, and yet someone else is controlling them. So what the education system should be doing, it should be saying, we have a policy of land reform that has now seen millions of hectares move hands from John Soap to Ohlongwane. Ohlongwane njengoba sebenomhlaba, do they have access to the market? Do they know how to do plant pathology and understand diseases and to do production cycles? Do they know how to do to manage a farm? This is where Ohlongwane would now say, nginomfana wami lapha UKZN ofunda lapha enyuvesi nomshana wenza i-accounting noenza i-agriculture, abaze la bahlale phansi siyenze i-company, operating company, and let them use their skills to make this work. Zimbabwe went through land reform. You go to Zim now, the turnaround on the farms, which were used to be used in Amabunu, producing tobacco, cotton, cattle. It's amazing what I'm seeing coming through the videos, that they have been able to increase the production over and above more effective land use, over and above what Amabunu were doing. But in the story of South African land reform is that when John Soap leaves the farm, kufika Ohlongwane, baqala ukulwisana ukuthi ubani ozohlala endlini enkulu ebehlala umlungu. Besalwa ukuthi ubani ozohlala khona. By the time they decide who lives there, akusekho izivalo nama-window. People have already distributed that house. The infrastructure is gone. Some of it is sold, some is stolen, some has been taken to the houses of different people. And the farm cannot operate.
Is it because of separation?
It's because we think black people, our understanding of communities is abantu abamnyama behlezi besebenza ndawonye. So when government thought about not splitting the farms, because I don't see if a 10,000 hectare farm has been distributed to even 400 families, I don't see what's wrong with 400 into 1,000 will give you what? Let's work with 200 into 1,000. So 50 hectares per family. 50 hectares is a lot of land for family to look at its own 50 hectares. And those that prefer to go to town could then sell their 50 hectare to the farmer, the one who is doing well. So you have that productivity. So we assume that black people work together, magudliwa, badla bonke, black people emngcwabeni bangcwabana bonke, emshadweni bayafika. But when this idea of no competition among black people is a myth. They have always competed. They have always worked as individual families, but also have the sensibility to work as a collective, so the assumptions around keeping these farms big is one example of what I call intellectual laziness within the policy making people, where people who draft policy are actually developing policy for things they have never done. So you find a minister of finance who has never run a spaza shop, who has never run any initiated a small business from beginning to growing it. Therefore, they have no abana mahloni to come to you and say, oh, what does your business plan say? What do you need? We also need plows and this, and they give those things, and they don't give you operating capital. And then they pretend to be surprised why the business is going when they didn't give you operating capital. And when they don't give you operating capital, they also have labor laws that says you have a right to be a member of a union, and you have a right to be paid at a minimum wage of 20 rands an hour. So when you come onto my farm, before you have even produced one single head of cabbage, you already have usuyinduna ye-union, you see shop steward.
So you shop steward.
Yeah, these people that are union reps, you are now already a union rep. And when the month ends, before the cabbage is grown and I've sold each cabbage, you want your money. You are not even thinking that let kabishal kagakhulu lel. You are already striking ukuthi ufuna imali. So I have to sell one of these equipment that government gave me so that I'm able to keep the farm running. So these people who create the policies that we work with behave like headless chicken. They just go around hitting everything and they're not really there is no focus, there is no sense of understanding ukuthi how exactly does the business and society works. So there is a disjuncture and ukhona ukungasebenzisani between the policy. So we have universities and professors that teach development, but they are not working together with the intellectuals in government who are producing policy about development. And you have civil society that is creating community programs, and there is no talking together between these four: business, industry, universities, and civil society. So until our communities and societies are able to work together and the young people see their role not as to look for employment, but to create employment. So if you look at most of the people in the cities, basuke emakhaya bashiya umhlaba.
Looking for jobs.
They're going to look for jobs on a farm. What's the difference between your own farm at home and the farm ka John Soap where you are lining up for a job? It's the education. It's the mindset, and our attitude to work. So I think in a nutshell, the other aspect of attitude is this thing. I think we are very much into instant gratification. We want to reap before we plant. We want to enjoy the fruits before we even plant and water them. So our attitude to money and our understanding of money is very poor. I always look at people who smoke. On average, how many cigarettes does a smoker smoke a day? Let's work with numbers quickly.
Probably
10?
6, 7.
Let's make them a 10.
10.
How much is one cigarette?
4 rand.
4 rand times 10?
40 rand.
40 rands a day times 30 days. 40 times 30? 1,200. At least. Times 10, 12,000. So an average smoker is putting 15 to 20,000 rands on just messing up the atmosphere.
Sorry.
On killing their own lungs. 15,000 to 20,000 a year.
Do you blame this generation or the...
No, I don't blame anyone. I'm simply saying the society and the way industry has, the way the system, and when I talk about the system now, I'm talking about a global economic system operated by crooks and criminals that are called CEOs of companies. These are people who, through social media and television, always fine-tune the art of giving a little and taking more from the poor. So these cell phones, how much airtime do you use a month?
Less than 100.
Oh, you're using less than 100. How much airtime do you think women use a month for calling and data? Let's say 200. Let's be kind. 200.
Yeah, let's be kind.
So 200. Let's work with the. Not even a month. 200 is like data. 3 days. People are spending thousands of rands on cell phones and data and airtime. What are they talking about? Uzofika nini? Uzokubona nini? And make how much out of that? And clever kids, white kids, use their phones and data sparingly, and they're using it to make income. All these things that other races are using to generate income, for us, they are used to take the little that we have.
Lack of education.
Poor education. We have a lot of education. This country has free education, but that free education, is it freeing the people or is making them dumb? So it's the quality of the education. It's not helping people to think systematically about.
So, Mr. BK, what advice can you give the youth? You know, because like in our 20s we're struggling. We don't know what is out there in the world, right? We're shocked. We have anxiety because we lost.
Yeah.
Yes, we lost. You know, we just
The last generation.
yes. Like what advice could you put out there to the youth that they could use, you know, to implement in the future or help them, you know, advance in their careers? Or should they just seek education or entrepreneurship? Like, what should we do?
So I'm both envious and sympathetic of people in your age group. In the sense that, firstly, why am I envious? I think you born at a generation and at a time where the technological revolution and the fact that the market has pushed very low the price of technology such as smartphones, data. It's still expensive for the poor person, but at least it's accessible. If you're not staying in the deep rural area and you're in the township, you can get 30 minutes to an hour of free data every day if you walk to a library to access Wi-Fi. But I'm also sympathetic to this generation. I'm a 2000 because they are born by absent parents. They are born by parents in my age group who were born by parents who were present. When I grew up, my father would go to work in the city, but my mother was there every day at home. And the fact that ubaba uzofika on Friday was enough for my mother to be able to say to me, oh, enzani kanje uzofika ubaba wenu ningayenzanga lento. That would mean that my mother had the support of my father even in his absence. The fact that he was there in uzofika on Friday would give her the power to be able to command our labor and command our discipline. Now, because I am not there to support the mother of my children, the same way my father was able to support my mother, even when he was absent. But the fact that uzofika was an important arsenal in my mother's basket. Of course, my mother was shy of ubaba, but she would also still have as an extra arsenal in her tool the fact that ubaba wenu uzofika. Ngizoyibeka njengoba inje lokho enikwenzayo. Yes. But you don't have that luxury. The average ama 2,000 don't have that luxury because ubaba ubhizi ngale, umama ubhizi ngale. The family is no longer a site of complementing and putting things together. The family was a mathematical site of addition and multiplication. Today's family is now a mathematical site of subtraction and division, where the man and wife, even behlala bonke, they are competing. You have a family where there is a language here, moto kama, moto ka baba, this kama, this ka baba. That's not a family. It's a site of competition. They might be there together, but they might not be pulling together in the same direction. So you have as the AMA 2000 that challenge. You are the most poorly parented children. You have been fed with compensatory parenting, where your mother buys you things ukuze ungachela ubaba esefikile ukuthi bekwenzakalani ekhaya. Your father buys you things because out of guilty of his absence in your life. And because they are career oriented rather than family oriented, when I grew up in the 80s and the 70s, the careers of our parents were not the orientation. They were a tool and an arsenal to propel the family. But now the family is a base where people are coming out of to propel the career. The career is no longer a means to an end, but it has become the end. As a result, whilst we were properly parented with very little, I always think today's parents is like the South African police service. And the 80s parents is like the Zambian, Malawian, Zimbabwean police service. Those police services have nothing, but they're very effective in policing. Today's parents have a lot of things like SAPS. My background is in the police, so I will give you stories about the police and policing and how we could do better with what we have here. So, today's parents has a lot of money, the average. Especially if you look at the battling children, are not children of poor people, because poverty is urgency for discipline. Being poor gives the average person something to fight for. The child of the nurse, the teacher, the policeman, the doctor, the engineer, feels they were born in community of property with their parents. Abahluphekile, abaswele lutho. Because abaswele ngalutho akaze alale engalambile, akanayo i-driving force towards change and towards betterment. They feel better already. Unless they are coming in a space where they properly parented and they are raised properly and told, your mother, your father can meet an accident, cancer, anything happens, and they pass on. And you will be like the other child. it can change just like that. But so that's why my opening statement was that I envy today's child, because today's child is growing in an environment where the tools for success are available. But on the other end, today's child is not emotionally and psychologically nurtured to be able to go out there and conquer the world. So the child coming from Africa then into South Africa is coming with that poverty. He knows what he left at home. She knows what she left at home. She knows that for her parents at home to eat, amehlo ajonge kuye. So there is a sense of that identity defined in poverty, defined in lack, that makes him or her ithe, because there are people that have traveled kilometers into this country and all they do is drink and work very hard and bahambeke bediza ngemali kumantombazana as if they're seeing izinqa for the first time in their lives. There are people who do that, who are not thinking for themselves and thinking about themselves. And they are driven by joy. But the average child who comes from a space that says, ngisuke ekhaya ngashiya abazali bajonge mna babheke kum, and my own livelihood and welfare ibhekele kum. And imagine you've traveled so many kilometers from Malawi, from Zimbabwe, Mozambique, over days and fighting with crocodiles to cross the rivers. And you come here, you just waste your time. That fact of being in the diaspora gives you something that says, when you go back, December, you see what happens in the border. In the borders in December, everyone is going back home. Abanye baze bantshontshe imoto or bacheleke imoto because they want to go there and show that they're coming from South Africa. So the idea of umntanami usegoli, wherever you are, if you're from outside South Africa, kuthiwa usegoli, whether useKapa or usePE, useThekwini, but I usegoli mntanethu. Egoli was that land of gold. So there is that pressure back at home that says, when you come back, what do you have? So I think your question is very important, that says, what then would be one's advice to the South African young person living kusikhathi samanje? If you're on campus, be politically active. Join a youth movement. Whether it's the wrong one or right one, uzokubona ngendlela. But be active. Understand the politics of the country and how it works. Understand the economy of the country and how the economy works. Understand money and how money works. Understand yourself. Who am I? What do I like? Where am I coming from? Who do I want to become? So you are a human being, which means that you are a spirit with a soul that lives in a body, right? You are a spirit with a soul, it lives in a body. If you die here, your friend will call ekhaya and say, Aibo, ngineendaba ezibuhlungu la ulangelihla akasekho. When your body is here, in le et aiseko is that spirit and the soul that lives in this body. So until the average young person realizes that they are three in one, and when they live to grow not only bodily. Kukhona abantu abakhulu mthi happy birthday to you, kukhule umzimba kuphela ingqondo ayikhuli. Kukhule umzimba kuphela, emotionally and psychologically abadevelop. So spend time feeding you, develop you. How do you do it? You have all these gadgets, a lot of things about self-help you can get. You talk to elderly people like you're doing a great job. You do just interact with people. How did you get to where you are? What was your journey like? Was this always your dream? Did you stumble on this? The average black person who is in a space where they are today, most of them is an accident. They didn't even, because you didn't have an idea. Tina mina ngikhulele ekhaya, the most important person ekhaya beku principal wesikole, induna yenkosi, nothisha, nonesi, usister wasekliniki, nobaba odibhisa inkomo ediba. Those were the 5 most important people. Those were our community role models. Nomfundisi wasesontweni, namadikoni. So, growing up in the farms, your exposure to things and life is limited. So I would say to young people, get exposed to life beyond your village and your township. Ukuhamba ukubona kukukhula. So when you save money, take a bus ride to Cape Town. Go and spend a week in a backpacker. Backpackers, these are the cheap B&Bs where you come in one big hall and there are bunk beds and what. On a cheap diet, on a cheap budget, you can travel to new places. Travel and see how other kids are doing things. The wider your geographical horizon is, the deeper, because each time you confront new people and new spaces, those new spaces give you new questions to reflect on yourself. Imagine, uzalwe kaDabeka, ukhulele kaDabeka, untombi yakho yakaDabeka, uma wakho wakaDabeka, ubaba wakho wakaDabeka, zonke izinto kuwe zidabekile nje. You have no exposure to life beyond kaDabeka. And over and above that, you don't read. Because the more you read, the more you travel, your horizon and exposure to life widens. And the number of questions you have and the way you think of yourself and about yourself changes as your exposure and your worldviews. Each new culture you encounter, it's new people. A lot of people think about Nigerians from a distance. Very few people have ever gone to a Nigerian, the Lapai Point Road, and say, guys, let's talk. Tell us about where you come from. How did you end up here? How do you do these things? Learn to interact with different people and learn how they do what they do and why they do what they do. That begins to help you to open up your mind, to start asking questions. So let's talk about relationships. Today's young people go into relationships too early. These so-called love relationships. Imjolonyisa nabantu abadala ubona nengane encane zifaka kulento engazazi ukuthi yini. Delay going into relationships until you know who you are. You have your sense of your own. If your sense of personal identity is mature, even the right person or right for wena will show up. Awuzazi ukuthi ubani, awuzazi ukuthi uyini. You're going to meet another confused person. What you have created is a union of confusion. The only thing that can come out of that confusion is tears and pain. So a lot of young people have opened their doors into these spaces too early for their lives, where they should be building on themselves. they already create, especially as young men, you are even in more trouble because you're most likely to get the girl is also raised in a way that she grow up in a community that says indoda must. And you now have to deal with this pressure of indoda must. And the little you now have to share with another lazy piece of bones who has on the table, the only thing they think they can bring on the table is their body parts. As if you don't have your own body parts. And the same reason that makes them live kubo ekaya, ukukudla kukhona, is because they're looking for your body parts. But their body parts have more premium on the market than yours. Theirs must be paid for. Why? Why are you putting yourself? And now, as a result, you always get the worst riffraff of the society because the best girls in the community who, according to the society's description of beauty, are taken by omalume abasile who can afford to buy ama chips when you can only afford to buy igwinya. And by the time they get to you, they have been rejected from that class and then they fall in your hands. So you always have the best, the worst of everything at every point in your life. But if you put the premium in developing yourself and becoming the best you can be, that's where your options get wider. And we know our Siacolis and the black rich guys always think that black girls are not good enough for them. Then they go for white girls, which is our African sign of having made it. Mausu Jola Nomloko. So it's a very worked up society, and it's a very messed up way of looking at life. So I've spoken about a number of things. Now I'm talking about relationships. For me, developing stable, one of the reasons white people buy a divorce and they abandon when I was with my fifth wife. So they have stable relationships, even if they may be short. But they see relationships as part of the equation. So white people don't work in the subtraction and division side of mathematics. They always either adding or multiplying. So when you start your relationships at the right time, with the right person, for the right reason, you actually can begin to develop the basis for a sound and better future because you have stability. And even the quality of your relationships when you go into them, they are not premised on the background of the number of hurts and heartbreaks you have had before. This is something new, it's something fresh. You're going into it after thinking about it, so it builds you. So you also need to have your own theory of God. Who is God to you? What is God to you? Are you able to exist outside the theory of a deity that is a God presence in your life, where you have to choose something to believe in? There is no one who is a non-believer. Everyone believes in something. It's either ukholelwa kwabafileyo amandlozi, either ukholelwa kuNkulunkulu, either ukholelwa kwini, but you must have a belief that molds you and helps to build and become the glue that builds your morality. And as a young person, you need to have boundaries. Whether they are moral boundaries, spiritual, material boundaries, you must have things that you say, this is what I do, this is what I do not do. As we grew up, we knew ukuthi akushayo 6 singakangene ekhaya. We knew that akushayo 5 inkomo zikababa zingakangene esibayeni. We grew up knowing that there are certain expectations that society, especially the family and the home, have of us. We didn't need to be told ukuthi ilanga selishonile. Besingabuzi ukuthi siphi. Bekungaphakwa ungekho. Uma ukuphakwa ekhaya ungakafiki, kungaziwa ukuthi uphi. Aliki iplate lakho, engeke ufike ugenqelize ekhishi lika mama. Usebeqedile ukudla usuzokubona kusasa. So there was discipline. There was a way of doing things. There was also hierarchy. We respected those that were elders and we learned from them. But over and above discipline, we were taught and raised in a culture where we contributed somehow. We didn't have the money, but our labor was important. So we grew up with the discipline of work. Besizindlulela imbheda, besiziklinela amabhodwe nokudla esikuphakelwe, sithatha izitsha siziwashe. We didn't wait, because in my home there were more boys than girls. We didn't think ukuwasha izitsha umsebenzi wamantombazana. We were not taught that even masyo buya nenkomo, we would come back neinkuni, logs for firewood. Ukuteza was not something for women, because ukudla was not for women alone. So we grew up knowing with the discipline of labor and work, which is something that today's, especially my biggest sympathy goes to the children that are born kuma families ongathi ayakwazi ku-afforda as long as abazali besaya emsebenzini, because you actually find they even have maids. Uma uya phesheya, I've stayed with white people in Italy, in Norway, in the US, in the UK. I've never seen a white family with a maid. It's a black phenomenon here we find in Africa. Ukuba nosisi cleaner gezayo. They come back from work, as they come, they know umama usendishini, omunye ufaka ilaundry emshinini, omunye uyayikhipha uyayina. When you come back, akekho ozohlala phansi avule newspaper abukele ibhola. They all stand up in the house. Omunye udila ne-homework neingane, omunye wenzani. The family become a hive of activity. Within an hour yokufika, everything that needs to be done is done. People eat, kids study, they go to sleep on time. Today, awunqena ukuthola umntana on 11 years chatting on WhatsApp ngo 11 p.m. We are not able to manage our own children because of what we call love for our children. Uthando lwethu luyabulala kwabantwana bethu. Alunama boundaries. So I'm talking about boundaries. So if you live without boundaries, so when I left home and went to university in Harare for the first time, I knew that on a Sunday morning I have to go to Sunday school. I knew that on a Sunday is church day. Saturday I'm in the library preparing for the rest of the week. I had to cook for myself. I washed for myself. I did not need a girl to go and cook for me as othumeli WhatsApp, please call ngiqedile. I didn't need to fat and set on campus so that I survive. But if you come from a home where all these things were done for you by your aunt, when you go to res, uzosithola uphila ngesinkwa, ne drink, nama chips and milk, ne tin. And that's unhealthy to live for the whole semester. So these whole disciplines of life, social, economic, material, political, is what I think the average child, the average young person need to immerse themselves in, where your time is the most important asset. Your time is what defines you. What are you doing with your time? So there are too many things that destroyed a person. Only two things. It's what they do with their time and what they do with the money they get. Imali ayibi imali ngoba iningi. When you have a good theory of money, every money that comes into your pocket is a seed. Before it leaves your pocket, you must make sure ishia izale enye imali. So, what did we do when we went to school? You get money, you buy a packet of sweets. That packet of sweets gives you back the money you bought with and gives you profit. So at the end of the year, growing up in the farms, I would go to my mother and say, kunama sports esikoleni azohamba endaweni ethile kufuneka $20 ngena $3. And when I go there, I'm actually not going empty-handed. I now see, okay, kuyashisa, they need cool drinks, those things in plastic, iqeda, bafunani, and I go there with a basket and a plastic of these things. My trip there, I come back, I went and got $20 plus this, I come back $50 worth. So it's an attitude to life that is about industriousness, about always looking for opportunities and creating opportunities, and the ability to see money and to see wealth and to realize that wealth is from your hands. Wealth comes from two things: products and services. People don't like discomfort. Anyone who creates a product or a service that makes people comfortable is the rich person, which is why the richest people today in the world are college dropouts, not university graduates. Because the university has the tendency of creating a stupefied, certified person. You're stupefied in the sense that your ability to write a good CV and a good letter of application is your currency. But the person who doesn't have that degree certificate knows that they need to be innovative and to be entrepreneurial in order to survive. So, in summary then, my advice to today's young person is to live their life in stages. If una 19 years usunentombi already, una 21 years usunentombi already, una 20 years usunengani, you've already skipped many stages of life. And this stage yokuba umfana ibhungwe endaweni, you never enjoy it because kuna lo unolila ozokulilela emandlebeni ekutshela ukuthi na ingane ayina pampers. Ingane zamanje azisanapkeliswa emnapkini ewashwayo, zigqoka lawo ama-plastic achabukisayo athengwayo ama-China every day. Kufanele wenze sure ukuthi every day unayo imali yama-plastic. Every day namabele engane zamanje abakhipha ubisi, bakuthengwa ubisi lo urethini. You need to be buying that. And if you are 24 and you're already worrying about doing this, when do you develop yourself? So the ability to delay instant gratification and know uguti, as much as the problem is that the other area that I sympathize with you is that media is over-sexualized the young person's, everyone's brain. Whether ubuki TV, uvula TikTok, uvula Facebook, whatever you watch today, there's a lot of sex in it. So everyone, where they are, whether umfundisi oshumayelayo, ubuka intombi eculayo kahle, eme kahle, whether usisi oculayo, oshanele esontweni, ubuka umshumayeli, ochaza okhuluma kahle, ommele kahle laphayana. Everyone is looking at the other, is undressing the next person in the room. So sex has become rather than a gift that God gave us, it has become a poison that has destroyed us. So if people would, so sex has been too casualized. God created it to be a joy enjoyed by two people within the context of marriage. But today the average person is happy to sleep with you. Even the average woman is happy to sleep with you, even if whether umthembisa umshado or umthembisanga, because it has become a casual thing. So how you manage your money, how you manage your time, and how you manage your body parts. Those three things. And what you put in your body, what you eat, how you eat, becomes the key pillars. And what you put in your body, whether food-wise, and what you put in your brains, what you read and what you watch. Online, if you're lazy to read, there's a lot of audiobooks. There's a lot of, you guys are in university, you have access to Wi-Fi, you can download. I can show you my download list. The things that I watch, it's self-help, innovation, business. I think money. I'm looking at stones, and I'm already in China buying a quarrying machine to crush those stones to start closing the potholes. Right? So I see a river, I'm already looking at establishing a fresh fish pond and stuff like that. So what you feed your mind is what comes out of it. And which is why this great man, Jesus Christ, says it's not what goes into a person that defiles them, but it's what comes out of them. So your question, which is a very important question that requires, their children are already in university, their house is already fully paid, they have a fully paid car, they can now start enjoying their lives as a married people, but all these years they've been struggling and making ends meet. So the white people's lives, I've stayed a lot with white people, and I admire the way their lives are structured. But as they get married at 25 and 20, they are not getting married with equality. They already have somewhere to start. They have a hand-me-down car, they have a flat that's probably been paid for them, and they start somewhere. But the black child, you and me, when you start working, you're probably the first person to work in your whole clan. Ugogo wako ushone ngashadile, ubaba wako akamshadanga uma wako, awukwazi nokushada wena bengakashadi laba. Our culture also plays tricks for us. And by the time you want to marry, you're already 37. 20 years later, you are 57. Ingane yakho isase isaqale tertiary. By the time you retire, it's only 63. That's only when your children are finishing a tertiary. Utu usazama impilo, enjoy life, usugugile, uyafa. Because our lives are not structured. We don't have these platforms where people older than me in the 60s and people in the 50s, in the 40s, 30s and 20s are sitting down ukunihlenganisa se-university. Njengoba ulapha university, maybe in your last year when you're now doing your honors, usungabheka ukunye okufikayo kungakamoshwa idolobha kusayenza first year udonsane nako uqala ukwakha something that's solid. But we hope, and some of these conversations that we are having are meant to do that. So if we could have more podcasts and online where you actually have more young men, young women sitting together and having intergenerational dialogues and conversations. Kukhona ukusenganqandeka. There is something that we still can serve. So I want you to be jealous about your time. How much of your time are you putting in studying? How much of your money are you saving? I remember, I always tell people when I received my first student payout at the University of Zimbabwe, the first thing I did was I went to a mother at church, Otungayo, asked her to buy a piece of cloth for my mother. Amtungele ngubo. The second weekend I took the train from Harare to Mutare in Zimbabwe, ngahambisa ingubo ngayithengela umawa, just to say thank you. Nge payout yase-university ngisaqala nje. Then when I went back, the rest I bought umbrellas and jerseys. Kukhona omunye umama obethunga. I grew up in an enterprising family. So I'd know, okay, kuyafika iwinter kuzonetha ngithenga ama-umbrella, nginamajezi ngidayisa. So kufika lokho ngithenge. My room at Res was a tuck shop. So I was able to multiply that little and survive, but also going to church. I didn't lose that tradition. Engakhula ngiyenze ekhaya, going to church. It helped me. It grounded me. So my money and my time were guarded jealously. And the more people you bring in your life, the more chaos you bring in your life. Ubagade abantu you bring close to you. Ubagade abantu who speak into your life. Because what they speak can either make you or break you. So you must be very conscious and purposeful about whoever enters this space. One of the mistakes I made in my own life is to open up my life too much for everyone. So if I'm to go back and look back, even one day we can talk about how my marriage failed. And I think it has to do with that. That the people I brought into my life, the number of people I allowed to come into my space, and became my downfall. And even family members. It's not everyone who you are born with. It's not everyone you're born with and you grow up with who thinks the best for you. So to help anyone as you now leave university and you go and start working, you can help them where they are, so that you protect this space, especially when you start to build a family. Protect your family from outside interference, so that you are building it according to the way the two of you want to fashion it for yourself and to become a safe space for your own children. So once you start to do those things, it's a lot of things in that list I've added. You find that your life is not going to be the same. But above everything else, refuse to be average. Refuse to just pass. When you pass, pass well. Whatever you get to do, you must be known by it. If we dlala ibhola, dlala at the level kakhune. Ubani loba for ngeniselwa amagoli awu-2 Pirates. This young man were Sundowns. The colored guy. Williams. What's his name? Who lost the goalkeeper were Sundowns?
Oh yeah, it was
Williams.
Yeah.
When you do whatever you do, play it at that level. If I say soccer in South Africa, give me 4 names available now. Pesitao, right? I'm not a soccer fan, But I know that there was this Jeff Radebe, right? Uchabalala, Lekwelea, Steve Lekwelea. I can give you those names. I'm not a soccer fan. But those people, when they played their game, they played it at a level that's top. So what are you studying?
Geology.
Geology. So we must know you in mining, in geology. So whatever you do, you must be best in what you are doing because you're putting your time in it. The only thing that you are given as a gift by God is time. And time is an opportunity. It's an opportunity to showcase the God gifts that you were born with. So until you show surface it, do refuse to be mediocre and to be average. There are people, when I used to teach in university, people would say, I just want to make 51%. Ubona umuntu eskrima ucorridor ebangumsindo ngo 53%. And you're thinking, do we need to create a psychological ward, a psychiatric ward in this department? Kuhloli ingqondo yomuntu who cheers and screams for 53%. Uphelele kahle engqondweni. Mediocrity is one of the biggest sin for the average black child. Pursue a desire for a superiority of existence, superior logic, even when you argue and you speak. Whatever you do must be top war. If you do that, it's easy for industries. You see about Passimetric with all servants. They don't waste their time with CAO. The universities come to them and say, do you want to start with UCT? We have a bursary for you. Why? Because they have made it. So I think my parting shot would be that. Whatever you do, seek to be the best in it. Whatever you put your time to, make sure you are the best in what you're putting your time to. Whatever you're putting your money in, make sure it's producing. Don't work on negative and division mathematics. Always add or multiply. If I put my money in this is also play life. Life is like a chessboard. What you move, how you move, when you move it, determines the end result. So, and everything is at your disposal. Whether you are rich or you are poor, you come from a rich family or poor family, there is one thing that God has given us that is equal. It's time. So, don't pretend to be a rich child when you are not a rich child. Let the rich kids be rich kids and play like rich kids. You know where you're coming from. You're black and poor. Don't use it as inputs for a poetry and an anthology of complaints and lamentation. Use it as a motivation to better the next generation. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. So, good luck. So, having spent this my time, I want to hear and see the testimonies in how you move from here onwards and say, okay, this is how we spend our time, this is how we spend our money. If you're already coming from a family that has a bit of money, make it more money. What are the opportunities in my neighborhood? What is it that I can buy and sell in my neighborhood? What problems are... Innovation is simple. It's about being alert to your local problems and then finding solutions to them. Not forming a party to complain. Because some of these parties are made by who I call Jeremiahs. Jeremiah is a prophet in a book who has a whole book of more than 33 chapters called Lamentation. Ukulila. Incwadi nje ukukhala nje. So be a solutions-driven kind of young people. The person who did Facebook, Zuckerberg, was just playing, looking for this, and look at what Facebook has done. He's a billionaire. He never worked a single life in his life. The person who started Uber doesn't have a single car on the road, but he makes all the money all over the world. Where there is Uber, the money goes to his account. So create those things that are solutions. Study your community's problems, come up with a bankable solution. There is a lot of money chasing those kind of innovations. You at varsity, you have access to internet, develop an impeccable business plan, sell the solution. The person who developed Please Call Me from Vodacom, you know how much he's worth? 50 billion rands. By just designing something that says, please call me. He doesn't have a bank, he doesn't have all the phones, but because everyone is sending a please call, now he is a very rich black kid. So whether you are born in poverty or in richness, it doesn't matter. It's what you do between when you are born and when you die that determines where you will end in your life. All right.
Thank you, Mr. Big.
Good. Take care. Good meeting you. Let's hope it works. It's been
Don't say goodbye. Don't make me cry. Oh, we're fading again, but I won't give in to you. Do you feel it there in the midnight air? Do you feel it? Ooh la 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 la, ooh la 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 la. Do you feel it there in the midnight air? Do you feel it? Ooh la 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 la, ooh la 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 la. Don't say